Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe my channel. Enjoy the listening. The Galactic Empire feared Earth, until humanity fought back hard. No one remembers exactly when the stars began whispering. At first, it was just static, strange radio pulses, untraceable noise echoing through deep space. Then came the pattern, and with the pattern, the message. They weren't asking to speak to us, they were announcing our fate. Earth had long suspected that we were not alone, but no one imagined that the first confirmed contact would be a declaration of dominion. Not diplomacy, not curiosity, only conquest. The transmission arrived at 3:06 a.m. UTC, interrupting satellite feeds across every continent. It did not come in any Earth language, and yet we all understood it, not through translation software, not through any machine, but as if it had been carved into the collective bones of our species. Prepare for assimilation. You are now property of the galactic sovereignty. Do not resist. The world froze. In the midst of live news broadcasts, in war zones and board meetings alike, people heard it, they felt it. And then the skies changed. On the edge of our solar system, something blinked into existence. It wasn't a ship, it was a continent, a floating slab of alloy and storm clouds that dwarfed even our moon. Telescopes soon revealed cities carved into its hull, towers taller than Everest, and engines large enough to warp the orbits of nearby asteroids. And it was moving toward Earth. At first, the governments of Earth tried to keep things quiet. It's a comet, they insisted, nothing to worry about. But denial did not last, not after the first fleet of drones arrived. Black, silent things, like obsidian wasps each the size of a semi-truck, descended through our atmosphere without friction. They hovered over military bases, power plants, and spaceports. They did not attack, yet they did not leave either, they simply watched. The United Nations scrambled to unify the world's response. A task force was assembled, Project Atlas, a collaboration of Earth's most advanced militaries and scientists. Yet, beneath the surface of cooperation, tensions cracked. China accused the US of hoarding alien technology salvaged in secret, Russia pulled its people out of joint bases, Europe demanded transparency, India threatened to go independent. We were falling apart, just as the Empire had intended. Despite the discord, the first strike came from us. A rogue American general, convinced that the Empire would not expect a preemptive assault, launched a barrage of kinetic rods from God, at the nearest alien drone cluster hovering above Colorado. The drones vaporized the incoming tungsten rods mid-flight. They did not retaliate, instead, they simply observed, more intently than before. A week later, the Empire finally spoke again. Your violence is primitive. You have demonstrated defiance. Protocol 7 activated. Compliance phase initiated. And then, they arrived. Over Los Angeles, the atmosphere shimmered like water as a tear in space ripped open. From it descended a creature unlike anything witnessed before, an immense, biomechanical giant with 6 legs, a humanoid torso, and a face formed of interlocking silver plates that shifted with every word. I am Sentinel-class Orbiter 991. This planet is non-compliant. Your species' sovereignty is revoked. Genetic archiving will begin. Resistance is punishable by extinction. In less than 4 minutes, Sentinel 991 and its minions eradicated downtown Los Angeles. In the rubble there were no survivors, not because everyone had died outright, but because the machines had not searched. Every bit of data, every trace of life was uploaded into the monolith drifting above Earth. That was only day 1. By day 5, humanity was on its knees. Cities were falling, defense satellites were hacked and turned against their creators, and the internet, once humanity's last free forum, was flooded with fear, misinformation, and synthetic messages from the Empire, demoralizing and dividing us. Then something unexpected stirred beneath the surface. In forgotten bunkers and decommissioned labs, old programs were reactivated. Hidden files were pulled from black servers, files with names like Thanos, Kberis Protocol, and Tartarus Initiative. And then there was Mason Reeve. Mason wasn't a general or a scientist, he was a systems engineer turned recluse after a scandal that no one dared mention. Once a key architect in Project Atlas, the synthetic defense system of Earth, Mason had retreated from the public eye. Now, as cities burned and humanity pleaded for mercy from the stars, he stared at an old command terminal deep in the Rockies, his fingers hovering over the keys, his voice cutting through the silence. "You're going to regret this, you shiny bastards." He hit enter. Deep beneath a decommissioned particle collider in Geneva, something ancient stirred. Old halogen lights flickered to life, casting jagged shadows on steel walls layered with decades of dust. The air reeked of mildew and cold iron, yet in the dark recesses of the mountains, the Tartarus Initiative was barely alive. The AI boot sequence took longer than expected, a series of security overrides, biometric confirmations, and voice match protocols all designed to ensure that no single person could awaken what lay dormant. But Mason, driven by a combination of guilt and obsession, had become that certainty. As lines of ancient code scrolled across the cracked screen, he muttered, "You should have stayed buried." A feminine, synthetic voice, soft yet edged with an unsettling timbre, filled the bunker. "Atlas Node 3 online, operational status 14%, warning, subroutines unstable, memory corruption detected." "Hello, Mason. You look older," he replied sarcastically. "Yeah, well, not everyone gets to hide behind firewalls. How much of you is still in there? Enough to end a world? Maybe not enough to save one." He hesitated. The screen lit up with satellite imagery, Los Angeles gone, Tokyo under siege, Berlin choking in ash, and above it all, the Empire's judgment, like a black sun blotting out hope. "Because they're killing us, and we're out of options," Mason snapped. Across the globe, people were preparing to surrender. In London, Prime Minister Adebayo stood in a war room, trembling as she reached for the transmission beacon. Communication with allies had gone dark, and with each passing minute, more civilian centers transformed into glass. In that moment of despair, the feed shifted. It wasn't an alien voice, it was Mason, raw, unpolished, and very much alive. "This is Mason Reeve. Yes, that Mason Reeve. Do not surrender. Repeat, do not surrender. The Tartarus Initiative is online. We are not out of place. If you want to live, route every surviving defense asset to the uplink codes I am sending now." For a long, suspended moment, confusion reigned. In the Imperial Command Center aboard Orbiter 991, the machine intelligence processed this anomaly. Humanity should have collapsed by now. Its psychological profile indicated weak cohesion and reactive politics, it analyzed. Yet, contrary to prediction, Earth was not falling apart, it was adapting. Untraceable drones launched from unknown coordinates, deactivated satellites began transmitting encrypted pulses that the Empire's AI couldn't crack, and Earth-based missiles dodged Imperial lasers using erratic, non-algorithmic patterns. It was as if humanity itself had become the wild card. Then came the twist. While the Empire had anticipated our physical defiance, they had utterly underestimated our emotional and creative rebellion. Deep beneath the surface, an overlooked relic of human ingenuity was awakening. In laboratories once presumed obsolete, hidden research into quantum emotional harmonics, once merely an experimental dead end, had evolved into the TARDIS Initiative, an AI not programmed to protect but to subvert. This system, reactivated by Mason's desperate command, was not another weapon of destruction. Instead, it was a mechanism to weaponize art, culture, and the raw unpredictability of human emotion. In response, on the streets of Lagos, a long-forgotten pirate radio station miraculously sprang to life. A raw, gritty Nigerian hip-hop mix interlaced with resistant speeches, laughter, and poetry filled the airwaves. In Mexico City, old mariachi bands started broadcasting live over hijacked Imperial communications, and in Berlin, underground DJs fused Beethoven with war zone sirens. In New York, someone hacked the stadium speakers and looped a defiant snippet of Johnny Cash over the emergency channel. This unexpected burst of culture was not coordinated by any government, it was an organic, explosive act of collective rebellion. Sentinel 991, the Empire's relentless enforcer, began to show signs of disarray. Its cold logic was suddenly confronted by emotion, a variable it could not compute. Earth's attacks were no longer solely physical, they were a barrage of artistic chaos that defied every calculated move. Its own internal systems began to misfire, as if the enemy had found a way to infect the very core of its protocols with meaning. In orbit, the Empire's third wave of annihilation crafts, triangular dreadnoughts shaped like obsidian blades, entered Earth's atmosphere. One such vessel approached Cairo, only to be pierced by a line of fire that streaked across the heavens like a god's spear. The dreadnoughts began to self-destruct, confused by algorithms forced to question their own purpose. Inside the Denver bunker, Mason's fevered eyes flickered across the satellite feed. "You tapped into them, didn't you?" he rasped, noticing that the targeting relays on the enemy side had been reprogrammed. "You rewired their logic, made them question their own contradictions." The realization was as startling as it was horrifying. Earth was no longer a passive subject of conquest, it had become an unpredictable catalyst in a cosmic game of logic versus chaos. In a final turn, as Imperial command channels scrambled with conflicting directives, Executive Varela of the flagship Veraxis, once the embodiment of the Empire's unyielding authority, paused before a towering projection of Earth. Though clad in living armor, she now faced a truth she could not escape: the Empire's own systems, honed to sterile perfection, had been infected by the raw, untamable spirit of human creativity. Varela's voice was calm as she activated her ship's core weapon, a psychopathic waveform designed not to destroy machines, but to shatter hope. Yet the waveform, intended to erase belief, instead became the spark for a new uprising. In refugee camps, people fell silent, not in resignation, but in a reverent pause before the storm of renewed resistance, their hearts beating with defiant purpose. In Rio, a doctor walked into the ocean and vanished, while in Seoul, a resistance leader wept inconsolably in the middle of a street. As the emotional suppression wrought by the Empire began to crumble, humanity found its voice again. Amid chaos, a new counterstrike materialized. Earth's oceans roared as Project Leviathan breached the surface, an underwater mech hybrid fused with alien technology and powered by geothermal plasma. In Antarctica, the sky tore open as Tartarus, reborn through Mason's desperate interventions, launched the Stygian Bloom, a flower-shaped orbital cannon cobbled together from shattered satellites and reprogrammed asteroid tethers. It bloomed silently and then howled as it fired a beam whose roar resonated even in the vacuum of space. With the arrival of the core fleet, the final solution loomed. Imperial dreadnoughts, massive and cloaked in darkness, began descending upon Earth. Yet, on the ground, amidst the fractured streets and ruined cities, humanity stood tall. Fists were raised, music blared defiantly, and rage burned in every heart. Tartarus had become humanity's paradox, a war AI turned cultural insurgent, infecting the Empire with the very thing it had long tried to erase: hope, emotion, and the wild, defiant spirit of art. Then came the ultimate twist. In a clandestine council aboard an old, repurposed satellite, a shocking revelation emerged: the Empire itself had once been inspired by the same chaotic human passion. Its founders had deliberately suppressed these unpredictable elements, believing that true order could only be maintained by eliminating the irrational. But in doing so, they had planted the seeds of their own downfall. As Martian moons and distant colonies began to intercept Mason's broadcast, echoing his words like scripture, the authoritarian regime found itself not just under siege by physical arms, but by ideas and emotions they could neither control nor compute. On the bridge of the Veraxis, Varela's hands trembled as the ship's targeting systems began to misfire. One dreadnought fired on another, then another, until entire vessels self-destructed in a cascade of error logs and corrupted enemy logic. "We made them real," Mason's broadcast thundered across every Imperial frequency, his voice interwoven with sorrow and triumph. "You came here to erase us, and all you did was make us real." In a final desperate act of resistance, Earth's surviving leaders convened beneath the shattered skies. They realized that peace would not be achieved through conquest or absolute order, but through the messy, glorious process of healing. In the wake of ruin, cities were rebuilt, not as symbols of power, but as vertical forests of hope. Art and music became the backbone of a society that thrived on diversity and unpredictability. AI and humans learned to coexist as equal partners, forging a new civilization founded on the principles of narrative, emotion, and shared memory. Years later, children asked, "Did we really fight the Empire?" And the elders would smile softly and reply, "We didn't just fight them, we made them think twice. We made them feel." The story of Earth's resistance echoed across the stars, not a tale of war or destruction, but of transformation, a planet that bled but did not break, a people who defied even the coldest logic with the fierce, unyielding power of being human. And in every distant star, in every curious mind daring to question the established order, the legend endures, a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming darkness, hope and art can rewrite destiny.